Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is the 8th and supposed final movie in the Mission Impossible franchise. The movie is directed by Christopher McQuarrie, known for doing the last few entries in this franchise. The movie stars Tom Cruise, Hayley Atwell, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, and Esai Morales. This is one of the movies I've been anticipating pretty heavily, not just for this year, but pretty much since the previous movie ended, which at the time of its release was initially titled Dead Reckoning Part 1. I suppose their reason for changing the name was because they knew having the word final and marketing the movie as the very last in this major decade-spanning franchise would do well to pull people in, and from the cinematic experience I had, it definitely worked, because while my cinema wasn't at full capacity, there was still a sizable amount for what, at least in my country, is essentially opening night. But with all of this hype in mind, how does it hold up, not just as a movie on its own, but how does it compare in the overall franchise? I'm going to start with the performances, starting obviously with the man himself, Tom Cruise. Since reviewing Dead Reckoning, I've seen a good few more of the guy's movies, and his status of being most likely one of the last major movie stars reigns very true. He's a pretty great range than I think most people give him credit for, and one of the things that the guy does pretty well is action movies. Ethan Hunt in this movie is pretty much the same as he is in a majority of these Mission Impossible movies, and that's not a bad thing, of course. Cruise plays this to his strength by showing himself to be a man determined to get his mission accomplished while being compassionate about the people in his team. His character you always root for and are always able to get behind. I suppose in a way it's more than easy to get behind his character when he's battling against a villain, which at least in these last two Mission Impossible movies, in this case, has been AI, which I will talk about in more detail later in this review. Cruise brings a great deal of charm to his character here, like he has done in a lot of the other movies. Besides having a lot of in-hand skills, it always feels like he represents the everyman, which, funnily enough, is the same vibe he gives off whenever he does other action movies outside of this franchise too. Hayley Atwell does a pretty good job in this movie too. While she is portrayed as this movie's love interest, she still has a lot of other qualities to her character, which Atwell pulls off very well. She portrays the character to always be confident and headstrong in a lot of the more tense situations of this movie, and by the end of the feature, her character becomes an equal to Cruise's character. She basically takes center stage during the third act of this thing. She does great in the action scenes whenever she's fighting against people. It always feels believable, which is what you want in a movie like this. Ving Rhames is a delight in this thing. Whenever his character is on screen, he always oozes charm. I think a lot of people that are fans of this franchise would consider Luther the heart of this franchise, and I'm easily inclined to agree with them. Whenever you see the guy, it's easy to simply smile. He doesn't have too much to do in this movie, unlike a lot of the other movies, since in general there are so many characters in this picture, but for the time he's in it, he makes the most out of it for sure. Simon Pegg is pretty good here too. While I think the screenplay doesn't give him as many jokes to crack as the other entries may have in the past, there's still a good performance here. He's in a lot of the more emotionally poignant scenes of the movie and does a good job at balancing humor when it's needed, while also knowing how to get serious when the moment asks for it. Esai Morales was pretty good as the villain in this movie, while to me I think the main antagonist is the Entity, which is the name that they give the AI system in this and the last entry. But as a human antagonistic force, Morales does a good job by really hamming it up in a lot of moments. You can tell by him that he is having a lot of fun in the role. There's moments where he will be laughing or even just screaming, and sometimes he'll give certain facial expressions that add a lot of nuance to his character. While he isn't around for as long as some villains should be whenever he's on screen, he was a joy to watch. Pom Klementieff is back in this final entry. She was introduced in the last movie and brings a lot of the same qualities here too. She's really good in any action scene that she's in. She has a way of locking you into her movements as she glides across the screen, kicking and punching people while the camera follows. She's a really great action star, and it was nice seeing her have more of a bigger role here than in the previous movie. Tramell Tillman is one of the few newest cast members in this movie. While I haven't seen this show myself, I know that he is in the show Severance, which I hear nothing but praise for, and I can honestly say, after seeing him in this movie, I'm insanely interested to see where this guy's career goes from here. He isn't in that many movies so far, but I'll be sure to tune into whatever he gets cast in, because I really liked him here. He shares a few scenes with Tom Cruise and is able to bounce off Cruise's charm really well. He's another example of an actor that steals the scenes he's in. It was always great watching him whenever he would be on screen. screen. The plot for this movie essentially picks up where the previous movie leaves off, which again makes me bid the question as to why the name change was necessary outside of getting more people in seats for marketing reasons. In a way, it feels like you can stitch Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning together into one movie with the way they're structured. Maybe somebody will give that a shot one day. The plot in itself is fine and pretty standard stuff for a franchise. It doesn't do anything to subvert any expectations that have been made for the series so far. However, there is something done in this movie which in a way subtly gives a meta explanation as to why for some people the franchise may seem formulaic, which I won't go into full detail here. I found it cool how they also gave a reason for basically every movie to exist, which sure you can argue the previous movies did in a way, but this movie makes it pretty clear early on that you should have watched every single other entry in the franchise, which thankfully I had done in preparation for Dead Reckoning when that movie released. In a way, I do think a lot of plot happens in this movie. What I mean by that is I think almost too much happens in this, and for a lot of the time for just far too long. While I can be a defender of long cinema and think every story deserves to be as long as they need to in order to fully tell their story, at the same time I have to admit I think this movie is a little bit too long. A lot of sequences I think could have been cut down shorter. There isn't a lot of useless filler or anything, but I do think the movie just could have been cut down. There is also a lot of over-reliance of showing clips from the other installments of the franchise, which at first was pretty charming. I get it, it's the last movie, you want to go all out, it's like a celebration, whatever. I even got a kick out of seeing Philip Seymour Hoffman on screen for a few seconds, but this happens quite a few times in the movie to a point where unfortunately I think it came out more as gimmicky than anything else. For one, it eats into the runtime, and sometimes it made me think they were talking down to the audience by the way that they were showing these clips, which I hope wasn't the intention behind this. I'm sure it was just their way of paying tribute to the fans and the franchise itself, but I think there just should have been less of it. Obviously, a big thing in this and all of the other Mission Impossible movies is the stunts, and the few that are in this movie are pretty entertaining to watch. One of the first major ones is another extended sequence of Tom Cruise underwater, which, looking at the behind the scenes footage of it, includes a rotating set filled with water, which is super impressive to see both behind the scenes and on screen too. The biggest stunt of the whole movie though, which kept me entertained and hooked to the screen, was the stunt during the last act of the movie, which is the extended dogfighter plane stunt, which sees Tom Cruise balancing and climbing between two dogfighter planes. The scene is fun, tense, and insanely entertaining from start to finish. I really think this is the highlight of the whole movie, not just this scene, but the entire last 40 minutes really carry the film and maybe enjoy it even more than whatever I had already enjoyed. I think the previous entries have had more depth-defying stunts, which will always be iconic, but this movie still has some insanely entertaining ones that I loved watching. This movie is shot really well. A big pet peeve I have in action movies is when they don't know how to shoot action scenes, but thankfully all of the entries in this franchise, including this movie, knows how to shoot the action. It's always clear on what's going on. There are too many frantic cuts making the action feel disorientating, which I can always admire. This film is lit well and has nice contrast, which whenever I'm watching new theatrical releases, I will always appreciate any movie of any genre, and it's done well here too. There's countless numbers of focus pulls in this thing, almost to an extent when there are too many of them. This movie brings back a lot of the Dutch angles that the first movie is probably mainly known for. Anytime it was used here, it was always welcome to see. I only wish they would have brought back the split diopter shots that would have been used in the first movie. It would have been a nice callback. The sound design in this isn't something I thought I would be majorly drawn to, but I was pleasantly surprised because the sound design here is done really well. Whenever the characters are in locations like an aircraft carrier or under the water, and especially in the air during that final act, it's always composed in the most satisfying way where it isn't too loud, but it will always manage to leave an impact. In a way, it helps keep you immersed in the experience. The actual score for the movie is good. The main Mission Impossible theme is given one more revamp, which I think in this version has more orchestral sounding tones than any of the other versions of the theme. A lot of other music in the movie felt pretty standard. It suited a lot of the scenes in which it was used for, but at the same time, it just feels like it could be any type of music you'll be hearing in a lot of action movies coming out nowadays. The editing in this movie is something I want to touch on briefly because there sure surely is a lot of it, sometimes feeling like it's unneeded. Maybe this was intentional as to capture a sense of anxiety the characters would be feeling. But this type of editing I think should only show up in the most pivotal, tense moments. However, it's almost constant, as there will be moments where a shot will be presented which will then have a cut to a more close-up shot of the same thing happening. Now this isn't a close-up to reveal something with more information, it's just the same image a bit closer with a cut in between, which happened quite a few times and just left me confused. Another part of the editing I actually thought was charming, which some people may find cheesy, was the transitions, not just between scenes, two of which are done by using water that rises up to on the screen that transitions into the next scene, but transitions that are used as well are these circular wipes, and I don't know, a part of me liked it mainly because it's something you don't see too commonly used anymore, so that was nice. Overall, I did like this movie. I want to preface that I did like this. Admittedly, I may have gone in with slightly high expectations for it, but I didn't stuff myself up for viewing an absolute masterpiece. I was entertained for a good chunk of the film, despite, like I said before, it does stray on more of the long side of things. I do appreciate these last two movies having the main antagonist be AI. What they do in this movie is basically make followers of the entity AI seem brain dead and blindly willing slave followers, which I find to be pretty interesting commentary coming from the movie, as it's clear that unfortunately a lot of people are starting to become more reliant on AI in every form possible. Hell, you can't even go on Google without every search result first showing an AI answer, which whenever I use the site I attempt to just look past almost immediately. I see this movie sending messages to people that are over reliant on AI as a warning that while now in our universe it seems harmless and making brain rot memes you'll find in the depths of TikTok and Instagram, but with a little bit more hindsight could end up being truly more malicious, so I respect Cruise and the team for including this. I'm giving Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning 4 stars. It's an entertaining, thrilling ride which serves as a pretty decent closer for a consistently solid franchise. If you would want to know my ranking of the movies, here it is up on the screen right now. The action is good, the stunts are fantastic, the performances are enjoyable, and I think fans of the franchise are going to enjoy a lot of aspects of this movie, despite it maybe on a bit of the long side of things, which I don't really know how much I can defend. Like I said, there isn't much filler, and there's enough excitement to keep anyone watching engaged. This would be a great cinema experience for anyone that is able to watch the movie in a theater. If you are able to, you may be lucky enough to even get a message from Tom Cruise himself before the movie begins. However, this was in my cinema, and I'm not sure if this applies to every single film. I do recommend the movie, and while I enjoyed it, I don't think it's the franchise's absolute peak, but it's still a pretty good time at the movies, which at the end of the day is these filmmakers' intention, so they did a good job there.